Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday, so that means I'm welcoming you back to another episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, here on the Coalition Radio Network. I'm your host, Chaz Calenda. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Inman and Torgy in Coventry, Rhode Island. And as usual, I'll be hosting tonight's show, and as always, I will be keeping the law above politics. We're continuing this series where we're discussing various legal issues around Rhode Island and nationally. And tonight we're going to specifically focus on recent protests by healthcare workers over Governor McKee's vaccine mandate and some of the lawsuits surrounding both the vaccine and mask mandates in Rhode Island and from around the country. Joining me tonight is frequent guest here on Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, and Coalition Radio Network Station Management, Pat Ford. Pat, thank you for joining me tonight, as usual. And did we have a busy few days or what? Was I imagining this?
Uh, I'll spare you my rendition of Neil Young's Hurricane, but there is a hurricane is hitting gale force winds the Rhode Island political scene, literally on every level. Chaz, you and I could talk for 3 or 4 hours a night tonight. Campaign announcements, derision, division. There's dogs and cats, cats and dogs. It's the Democratic left is melting down. The Democratic right never had a soul because it's a meltdown, but they're out there. And then of course you've got the COVID, and everything about it is just fear and loathing, buddy. Fear, loathing, and chaos. That's what's out there right now. And it's the analogy I'll draw is, if you've ever seen one of these old-timey children's tops where the child spins it, and it spins and spins and spins and spins, and eventually, gradually comes to a halt. Well, Rhode Island politics is like a child's toy. A lot of it's run by children, except in this case, the top spins at an ever-increasing rate. I've been following this and doing this for a long time, my friend. After today, you ready for this? I am a man of few words.
What? I'm sorry, who are you and what happened to Pat Ford?
I don't even know where to begin. The prospect, and her name's been mentioned a bunch of times, obviously, but the prospect of yet another Democrat entering the race, holy cow. This just changed, and we're not even going to really get into that, but you have to mention it. A Democratic Don Kucheri, is that what we're talking about? Who's obviously
certainly
a very accomplished woman from a business background. She was Gina's one of aide de camps. Comes from very much the same mold. One significant difference: this woman has had a very successful business career where Gina didn't. but when you're in the C-suite of an organization like CVS, that's the real deal. And at the same time, having gotten into that position, she knows how to play hardball politics. And so the 8-month night of long knives has just begun. And
I can only imagine the knives that are going to be coming out during this primary, and we don't even have an announced Republican opponent at this point. Never mind a primary on the Republican side. So there's going to be a lot of focus over there on the left.
Anyone who thinks they know how this movie ends, I got to tell you, no idea. No idea. I thought Magaziner kind of had it wrapped up. If she didn't jump in, now she's got a whole lot of money to spend. So she
certainly does. And I like I said, I don't necessarily want to harp on the horse race over there on the governor's side, but I do want to say that I thought going into this, when Governor McKee took over the reins from Governor Raimondo, having the reputation that he did as a business-friendly, kind of moderate type from the Democrat Party, Had he followed through on that, and I don't think he has by his actions, I think had he followed through on that and been the business friendly, been the accessible, and not caving to the extreme wing of his party type, I think he would have had a fairly good shot of winning his own term coming through. And I don't see that happening at this point, given not only given Magaziner's resources and our newest candidate, announcement, given her resources. I see that Governor McKee has embroiled himself in quite the controversies lately, and has been the focus of the ire of many Rhode Islanders at this point.
Well, and let's dive right in, because, I think one of the most common political cliches is to pick a hill to die on. For the life of me, the most polite expression I can come up for this impasse and the litigation and the legislation and again, chaos being the operative word around masks and vaccine mandates. I mean, what a hill to die on.
Especially for someone trying to win his own seat. I mean, this is not that's not where you go if you're trying to bring a broad coalition together to get you elected.
Right. So I guess the first issue we need to discuss is, in fact, and full disclosure, I sat in court today and covered the case. We're still processing, we say, a hella big video files necessary to get up that. So we will have an update later this evening from the coalition with some material. But let's talk about the lawsuit that no one seems to really want to talk about. And that baffles me. So, Chaz, if you can give us, ham and eggers, an introduction, and then maybe explain to me, as we like to say on the show, explain, Lucy, explain, why doesn't anyone talking about this lawsuit?
I'm glad that you are covering it, Pat, and I look forward to seeing this video or whatever coverage that you are allowed to do from the courtroom. It's my understanding that Judge Lanphier in the Superior Court's overseeing the lawsuit filed by several parents who are challenging the legality of Governor McKee's executive orders mandating masks in all schools, K through 12 schools here in the state of Rhode Island, and they're at the preliminary injunction phase. So the parents have asked the Superior Court to bar the governor from enforcing those mandates, bar the school department, the Department of Education, from enforcing those mandates on the grounds that essentially the way I read the lawsuit was that the governor's executive order, which dealt with COVID, even though they're trying to differentiate it, saying that it's not really just COVID, it's the Delta variant of COVID, essentially overstepped his legal authority when the General Assembly canceled all his emergency authority relating to the COVID emergencies, which had previously been declared by Governor Raimondo. And this was kind of an end run to get around the General Assembly's action by issuing this so-called new emergency declaration, so he could have the Department of Health issue all these emergency rules, masking mandates, so whatever you want to call them. And Judge Lanphier is hearing his testimony, is my understanding right now, from the plaintiff's side, the plaintiffs being the parents and their experts, and he is going to determine whether or not that executive order and those mandates can continue while the lawsuit plays out in state court.
Lead me through your interpretation, if you will. And again, the hallmark of this show is that there's the urban legends and myths that folks like me believe in. And for the 10,000th official time, I will say I am not an expert. I simply play one on the radio. And so, and we've all got our image of what ought to be. And there's a children's book that talks about, here's the day that should have been. But we all know that's not how it really works. And while I often say in the halls of justice, justice in the halls, this is actually a complicated legal case for a ham and egger like me. So if you could just go through the specifics, what each side is actually, the plaintiff and the defendant in this case are actually talking about. The issue that Dan McKee has been named in this lawsuit and still apparently continues to be named in this lawsuit is interesting to me, because normally at this point, while you psychologically add someone to a lawsuit like this, very often the court's already, peeled out anyone individually. So I know it's a tall order, but Chas Calenda, if anyone can do it, you can. 12 years in the AG's office, let her rip.
Well, I mean, the governor has to be named because he's the one who issued the executive order. So he's being named in his official capacity as the governor, as is Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, who is the director of the Department of Health, because she is issuing these emergency regulations under the governor's authority in the emergency orders that he's issued. So they have to be named in their official capacities. I kind of went through what the plaintiff's stance was. The governor's stance is this is a new emergency. In the General Assembly, while they did terminate the previous executive orders that had been issued by both Governor McKee and Governor Raimondo under the original declaration that was issued in March of 2020, that the governor retains his authority to issue continued executive orders in states of emergency, and that this is a reasonable way to combat the deadly, what they're describing as the deadly strife of COVID, the Delta variant specifically, and that masks in school, while understandably, and I'm trying to remember the wording from the state's brief to Judge Lanphier, well, understandably, the plaintiffs may be uncomfortable and want to return to normal, that the governor has a statutory and lawful duty to do what he has to do to protect people from this Delta variant. And they're saying that he has all the authority under the state law to do this, as does the Department of Health to issue these emergency regulations, and that making students ages 2 and up to wear masks without essentially any exemptions to attend school is the best way for them to do that. And they're not even actually saying it's the best way. It's a rational way. And that's just one of the ways that they're trying to get the court to say that the governor has the authority. This is a rational way to do it. And we're not really going to step in the way. I will point out one thing, though, Pat, because I did read the state's brief, which, by the way, is written by an assistant attorney general on behalf of the governor and the Department of Health. Your tax dollars are paying for that, ladies and gentlemen.
Excellent.
So just keep that in mind. So, but they are saying, but Judge, if by some chance you do think the plaintiffs have an argument here and that they are there is some question about whether the governor and the Department of Health has this authority to issue these mandates and these rules. This is a political question, and courts are supposed to stay out of political questions. That's a constitutional doctrine, not only on the state level, on the federal level that exists as well. So courts are generally not supposed to second guess political decisions made by other branches of government, in this case, the executive branch. So they're basically saying, we have the authority, but if we don't have the authority, you're not supposed to second guess us, Mr. Justice Lanphier. So please stay out of this and let us do our best to protect everybody and our all-knowing wisdom here in the state of Rhode Island.
So is the crux of the argument, ultimately, does the governor have the authority to declare a separate state of emergency based on a mutated form of a disease that we've already had a state of emergency for?
I think that really comes down to the crux of the argument, because if the judge were to find that this is basically the same emergency that was terminated by the General Assembly when they passed the budget this past year, then the judge would have to find that this executive order that was issued by Governor McKee declaring this new state of emergency on a mutated version of the same virus, which was already the subject of the prior state of emergency invalid. The judge would have to find it invalid, and then at that point, the schools would not be able to necessarily enforce a mask mandate statewide. Then at that point, it would be up to the schools to say whether or not they're going to do it without threat of the Department of Health or the governor for failing to do so. And earlier this year, we saw a town like Gloucester attempting to do that, but eventually folding under the threat of government action when the governor issued that emergency declaration. So that is the crux, in my opinion, of the argument, is whether the governor is really trying to do an end run around what the General Assembly did in the budget.
Are you aware of other states that have litigated or are in similar positions?
As far as the mask mandates, it's come up around the country, but it's been more in my review of some of the more high profile cases. It's been really more of the vaccine mandates that have been the subject of litigations. They have been similar situations as far as governors' executive powers to issue emergency mandates, executive orders that just kind of go on and on and on, get renewed without any sort of review. Particularly, we saw them in Wisconsin, Michigan, and some other states. Michigan was a particularly good example, I think, because they had a similar statute to what Rhode Island has. And they had the Supreme Court of Michigan struck down the governor's orders, emergency orders, and many of the restrictions that she had placed in effect, affecting businesses, schools, and the like, because they found that it violated the Michigan Constitution for a separation of powers issue and non-delegation power issues. So I think that was a good case of the judiciary checking the power of the executive branch, where the General Assembly really took very little action in that case. And here in Rhode Island, we've seen the General Assembly take minimal to no action to really try to rein in the governor, other than what they did in the budget. But again, you've seen the Speaker of the House, you've seen the Senate President come out and say the governor retains all his emergency powers, even after they rein them in during the budget. So we have leadership throughout the General Assembly saying, go right ahead, Governor. We're not going to do anything to stop you.
Wow. I never thought I would see the day, and obviously this has been going on for a year and a half now, where the General Assembly of the state of Rhode Island would back away from the ultimate control. Incredibly enough, it wasn't that long ago where Rhode Islanders wondered, somewhat pre-Jenner, why anyone would want to run for a governor's position that, at least statutorily and constitutionally, is allegedly, purportedly, kind of, supposedly, one of the weakest in the nation. And yet, these folks seem to have, I don't know, using pixie dust, for lack of a better term, have created this power center. And this same process is lording over $1 billion right now in government money. Yikes.
And that's been one of the most frustrating part, is the inaction of the General Assembly when they have all the authority in the world to terminate, modify, or even ratify the orders of the governor, who's using these emergency statutes to do what he wants, to basically rule. And I agree with the plaintiff's characterization in the mask case. He's ruling by executive fiat because there has been no action from the General Assembly to do anything to rein him in. So you can say it's hyperbole, you can say it's outrage porn, you can say it's whatever it is, but executive fiat is not an outrageous term for what's been going on here in the state of Rhode Island. The governor has basically been unchecked. The executive branch has been unchecked. And not only has he been unchecked, he's been supported by his constitutional counterpart, the Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island, essentially being his rubber stamp and his enforcement mechanism to make sure that his orders are being enforced, because the Attorney General is the one in court fighting for the governor, not the governor's private attorneys, not the governor's counsel, not even really the Department of Health's counsel. They have one attorney who's fighting for them, but it's really two assistant attorneys general who have been fighting on behalf of the governor and the Department of Health. And they did that I'm sure, at the behest of Attorney General Noronha, who is pretty much on board with the policies that have been issued as far as the COVID mandates and vaccines. Although he may not necessarily be supporting Governor McKee personally, he's certainly on board with some of these, with most, if not all, of these mandates.
Would you like to know who he's going to endorse? I bet you he goes with Magaziner. That seems to be. I have this image of a sad sack Governor McKee kind of left holding the chair. And if I will say in defense of the governor, one of the most unfair prospects of this, and he put his big boy pants on, he jumped into this, is the fact that he has to actually govern right now. Everyone else can just sit back and let Rome burn, literally. Let the conflagrations and the chaos reign. There's that word again.
And they're doing that.
Right. You would need most of these candidates, are going to be appearing in a milk carton near you. Not exactly profiles in courage on how to handle this, are they?
No, absolutely not. And I'm not gonna talk about anybody in particular at the moment as far as who's a profile in courage and who's not. But I have yet to see anybody who's currently in office, currently holding an office, a statewide office, act with the kind of independence and courage that's needed to protect people's civil rights, to do what's right, to seek out justice, particularly the Attorney General, whose sole mission it is to do that. You have political aspiration, you have political considerations for most of the other offices, but the Attorney General has done his best to turn that office into a political operation, if it already hadn't been one. But it's been astounding. It's been an astounding lack of political courage. It's been the same thing that we've seen in this state for 80 some odd years. The same old routines, the same political talking points, the same, we'll do everything for you. Just make sure you vote for us. And I promise we'll get these things done for you. And it just doesn't happen. And as somebody who's not been a political insider for my entire life, just kind of been, doing my own thing, working as an attorney. I was a prosecutor for 12 years, like you mentioned. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for people who don't have that insider connection. And I want to give a special shout out to the people who are speaking up for their rights and trying to do everything they can to give a voice to people who aren't being heard. People like Paul Rihanna Jr., who is a candidate for governor, and the people, the healthcare workers across the state of Rhode Island. I want to give them a shout out because I think that what they're doing, giving up their livelihoods, having it taken away from them, to be quite honest, and then going out there and publicly confronting the governor, the Department of Health, and all the people backing him. If you can't get answers in a way which is the regular way to get the answers, if the government doesn't want to respond to you, you bring the argument directly to them, and they've done that. And I think we saw that this past weekend.
Which brings us up to the subject at hand. And I'm going to toss Keyshawn sort of a curveball. I don't know if he can bring up any of the video from Friday night, just to kind of play in the background. Sorry, that wasn't planned, so I put that on him. I sound like a certain radio broadcaster now, don't I? I have to tell you, I've been in protests that were more violent. I've been in protests that were, in the tens of thousands of people. I haven't been shocked by a protest in a very, very long time, because a lot of them, if you've done this long enough, you know how the movie ends. didn't see this one coming. And I should have. I was out there 6, 7 o'clock that night. I was alerted to, and, it's in the media, you get a call, you get a message, you get a hint, a wink, wink, and a nod, nod, right? Something's going down. And you show up at the duly appointed spot, and, the first thing that went down that night, and it's important because there's a lot of people who are either through ignorance, intentionally or unintentionally, mangling the timeline. It's an important part of what happened. You had a group of people, regular Americans, and I almost hate to say that because everybody's a regular American. Doesn't matter what your ethnic background, your race, your religion, your sexuality. We're all supposed to be one big happy family. But after they met at the first spot, they got the move along from the town of Cumberland. You can't park there even though it's a public park. There was no late night sign closure. And by the way, this was early enough in the evening that what had been planned for about a half hour to an hour long protest, not the night-long marathon that ensued. So the plan was to everybody park at Diamond Hill Park and then get shuttled over to Phantom Farms, which is a private business on Diamond Hill Road, which had agreed, allegedly, to allow people to park on their their own little grassy knoll, or, kind of the overflow parking lot. And then it would be a half a mile or so or less walk to Governor Key's house. Originally, it was meant to be a private vigil in honor of an individual who had passed away due to allegedly the injection or the stab or the shot in the arm, whatever we're calling it right now. And there would be a vigil, and that would be it. But after going to Phantom Farms and getting ready to march, they were told they had to leave. They believe, the protesters appear to believe, that it was a result of direct pressure from the administration and the police. So then, this is where it started getting stupid, because now it's nightfall. This and if we've got some video, let's roll it. I think I can talk over this. You've got then people having to find parking spots. They then have to walk up Diamond Hill Road nearly 2 miles instead of the quick location that it was supposed to have been. And, it's nightfall. That's a windy road. It's sort of misting out. It's sort of crazy and totally unnecessary. Then they get to the blocked off road. They have to negotiate being able to go down the road. This is not a private association. And essentially, this is what I walked into when I finally found some parking. Crazy stuff,
like
buddy.
They're holding a vigil. It looks like they're holding a vigil right there. They're holding candles, right?
Right. They're holding, mostly it's electric candles or some form or another. Now, let's let this play for a second.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen. This is evil.
All right, one more thing before we leave. One more pledge of allegiance, guys. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Keisha, maybe you can hold it there for a second.
Wow. So I saw a vigil, I saw the Our Father, and I saw the Pledge of Allegiance. People cheering. I didn't see anybody destroying property. I didn't even see anybody on private property. And I didn't see anybody fighting, threatening, acting violently or tumultuously. Is that? This is just what I'm seeing on this video, and I understand there are several videos out there that may have caught these incidents on camera. But am I describing that scene right, Pat? You were there personally videoing that.
That was me behind the golden microphone and camera of the Coalition Radio Network. I haven't been to a protest where they said the Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Just, I thought I'd seen it all. But by the way, this is a part of every protest they do. Here's the irony here, and it's a twisted, dark irony. You have individuals who are loyal to this community. You have individuals who have put their lives at risk. You have individuals who are part of the, if you will, the program. In other words, they look to seek to work to affect change within the system. And they have been punched and kicked and brutally bounced around at every step because they've got a different opinion than the current administration and government writ large. And it is disgusting because these are otherwise nice people. Not exactly. I didn't see any, no one busting through Starbucks. No one. If we can,
much different than what we saw in downtown Providence a year ago. I'm not gonna. I don't want to further comment on that, other than the fact that I think we can all agree that some individuals in the Providence protests last year took it much further than anything we saw in that video by vandalizing stores, the Providence Place Mall,
and by the way, despite Jener's protestations to the contrary, the people who are ultimately held responsible for the physical destruction actually had nothing to do really with the Black Lives Matter movement or DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality. Turns out it was a bunch of hooligans who, let's just say at every protest, that devolves, you've always got an element there. And again, I've been to too many of them. All right. The first protest, by the way, and my friends have heard this story 100 times. I know you have. My first protest was somewhere around the age of 8 or 9 when I went to what was called, I believe, the war moratoriums at Bryant Park in New York City. My father wanted to make sure that my older sisters, and effectively me, saw these protests through his eyes first. So he actually took me. My father's a 98-year-old double Purple Heart winner from World War II. All right? And wow. This is the 60s. Imagine, all right, your father taking you to war protests so you can get an understanding and he can have a conversation with you about it. My father is, I'm his son. If we could ask Keyshawn, maybe if we can pick up the video where it starts, this is where things begin to devolve. The important point here is everybody was trying to go home.
Everybody's life is important, and you treasure life. And so this is why we're here. Let's continue to stand together, but always remembering love, peace, and light, and for human rights, for our body and our choices. Thank you. Amen.
And just remember, the healthcare workers from Rhode Island today, the state police might be forced to do it next week. That's right. It could be you next week.
Guys, for one moment, please bow your heads in a moment of silence. For Orlando.
Orlando, by the way, is someone who passed away very recently.
Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our
Yeah, just keep letting it play, Keyshawn. Thank you so much. I work with the best people in the world. I really do. I'm blessed.
Absolutely.
So again, you see a crowd. We're replaying some of the same video, but we're going to let it roll. They're on a public street. And I want you to think about this question, Chaz, because this is a critical point in the law. My understanding, and again, here you are clearing up, if you will, urban legends. It is my understanding that when you're in the street, and by the way, if you look down the videos, you'll see, yes, a closed street where police cars are blocking traffic. So they're not stepping into traffic, and there is no sidewalk. So the question becomes, does one sacrifice one's right to free speech because of the absence of a physical sidewalk? And what is, and again, we're watching people starting to disperse. The people in the green shirts were the organizers. They had people organizers. People are starting to, getting crazy here, walking down the street. There's someone, as they say, gesticulating. That's my big word for the day, Chaz.
It's a good one, gesticulating.
There's a woman in a wheelchair.
Right.
One of the, I have to tell you, one of the darkly humorous aspects of the protest is there's a gentleman who's associated with the protesters. He's got this great loop of a number of our leaders pre-election before they won and changed their course. Who he's got their quotes, and it's priceless. You're on this side street in Cumberland, and you hear the dulcet tones of Joe Biden. And what's the race car driver? Go Brad. What is it?
Go Brandon. Go Brandon.
Go Brandon. Go Brandon. Go Brandon.
Let's go Brandon.
All right.
So I don't understand why the state police are getting more involved here. Was there something that I can't see in this video that caused the state police to step in? Because it looks like the state police now approaching people.
Right. And I was a little bit of confusion. It's dark. People are trying to leave. Some people are going in the wrong direction just because, it's a windy road. They've lost their bearing. And here we go.
So, Pat, the police cars that were blocking the road, were they there after the protesters showed up, or were they there before the protesters?
According to a conversation I had as the night was beginning, they were already there. They had already closed the road. And you know what? From a security perspective, okay, there you have people waving. Let's go. You see people in the bright green shirts. They're sort of the organizers, if you will. They were the kind of the protest marshals. Now you see it getting stupid.
So what this person who's clearly being arrested now, this person, what was it that you could see, if you saw anything, that caused the police to?
From my perspective, I saw. I don't know if the film really captures it, but plainclothes police and policemen bumped into people. People reacted on a dark night being bumped into, and of course, that's the cue for law enforcement, for Leo, as we say, or the Popo, depending what part of the world you come from. All right. By the way, the woman there who's looking to be pleading, that is the mom of a former United States Marine who finds himself under arrest. And she's pleading with the police officers to let him go. Now, understand that throughout this night, from the get-go, there was and some folks called it a paddy wagon, but as I like to refer to it, it was I believe a General Motors multi-passenger 12-seat van, which was clearly there to indicate that they were ready to arrest people. Walking into this,
I'm looking at a plainclothes police officer screaming at an elderly woman, and I apologize if she's not elderly. I'm making the assumption.
She's the mom. No, she's the mom, and that, by the way, is the governor's personal bodyguard. Okay.
So here's the biggest problem I see with this. Other than let's put aside, I know this may sound, like I'm downplaying it, which I'm not. But let's put aside the constitutional issues of where they're supposed to protest, where there are no sidewalks, the streets are blocked off, all that sort of thing. I'm looking at a situation where the state police were escalating a situation as opposed to de-escalating a situation. And I think that's part of the problem here is that Rhode Island is one of, I believe it's, let me just make sure I got the number right. Rhode Island is one of 21 states that does not have any law that requires training for its police departments to de-escalate situations.
Well, it's pretty obvious here. And if I could point,
I think it's deadly obvious.
if I could point out an irony, there have been a number of protests, some of them very emotional and heated, at the state capitol. And I will tell you that the Capitol Police, and it's interesting because we tend to think of the Capitol Police as security guards, up until in the last couple of years where there's been tragedies where unhinged people, and I'm not talking about the insurrection, but a variety of people showed up over the years, and Capitol Police have tragically lost their life in preventing and maintaining the safety. Now, our state Capitol Police, on a number of times lately, have shown great restraint and a high degree of professionalism in dealing with a building where you think about it, Rhode Island is unique. You know, you've got this immediacy, this connection, this presence for all of us of our state leaders. You don't see that in a lot of places. You just don't. All right. I mean, I've sat down in restaurants and 2 tables away. I remember when I just moved here was Governor Ed DePreet, if I remember correctly, and you just don't see that. So, here you've got the Capitol Police, who I think a lot of people until recently thought of as security guards. They're not. They have been. I spent a lot of time in what I affectionately refer to as Halitosis Hall. All credit to Rudy Cheeks, or Mordor, depending on the day. But in Halitosis Hall, again, you've got this professional group of men and women who have visitors streaming through this building filled with priceless artifacts, by the way. There are paintings there that are priceless. And you just don't hear, do you, of any issues with the Capitol Police?
None. I personally interact with Capitol Police, not necessarily always at the State House, but the Capitol Police are also charged with protecting the courthouses and other state buildings. And I can tell you that the Capitol Police are always accommodating, always professional, and they deal with some tough situations, as do the state police. And I certainly don't want this to be an indictment on law enforcement in general, but I'm going to say that what I saw in that video was a gigantic overreaction to, I'm not quite sure what, because certainly the video doesn't catch any violence going on. What I could see was all of a sudden the plainclothes trooper basically taking down one of these individuals, and then 2 other troopers securing him on the hood of a car, and then that plainclothes trooper screaming in the face of this gentleman's mother. To me, that is an overwhelming and unnecessary show of force for a group of people who were, to the best I can see, they're doing no harm.
Yeah, so it's just unfortunate is the term people in the media use when they're on the air and they want to be polite. So we'll go with unfortunate squared. How about that? Yeah. And again, the officer who was screaming at a woman of age, as I affectionately refer to them as seasoned citizens, but that's her son that they're arresting. And I'll take the takeaway a step further, and this will be a little controversial, but you have to see the political trend now. The type of force, that type of force, I have seen before in Providence, and it's directed typically at an inner city population who some would argue are under siege by the police. The shocker for a lot of these folks is these folks are as American as they get. American, right? But I say that with love because these are folks, and by the way, it's a very multicultural community. If you look at these protests, it's not just white middle class folks. There's a significant portion of our medical community here, and I'm talking about CNAs, the duct tape that holds together or was holding together, before it was ripped off. off of an open wound, are folks of color from a variety of places, cities, ethnic backgrounds, cultures. And so you're starting to see that you're starting to see that in these protests. And my takeaway is there's going to be an awful lot of people this week who are ripping off their thin blue line bumper stickers and, the men in blue, protect the men in blue, because there's a feeling of violation. That's the sense I get from speaking and having quiet conversations with people outside of the rallies, outside of again, the term I would use, and I'd like to consider myself one as well, is a Boston term, and I call them ham and eggers, right? They're regular folks. The people who, they're the backbone of the state of Rhode Island, and again, the backbone of our medical community, and they feel ripped off, they feel abused, they feel, all because they've got a belief in a medical system that's different from the desires of the elite who run the state. And again, if we truly believe, and I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to ask Dr. Scott, one of our press conferences, I asked her if she believed in body autonomy, and she refused to answer the question.
What a shock.
And that's the MO here. Just refuse to answer the question, refuse to answer the question, refuse to answer the question. I'm told, because I was in court this afternoon, that Mr. Rihanna Jr., Paul Rihanna Jr., lived down the street from a stop that the governor, by the way, I can't even imagine what's running through his head. We have up on our YouTube, we played it, an interview I had with him Monday morning, where, the day before he'd been very polite to Channel 10, less so to me. And I'll just say this, if you have a chance to watch the video, watch it. It's compelling.
I watched it.
All right, and it appears officially that bunt cake is not headed in my direction anytime soon. No coffee, no Entenmann's, nothing.
No, I don't even think you're getting I don't think you're even getting the Little Debbie's on that one.
So these people feel, and I was with them, and we're going to post a video tonight. We've got a ton of video to process, and we're generating more video than we can handle, to tell you the truth. But I was with the folks for an hour or two, and I got to ask you one question as an aside. I was with these folks when they went to the state police yesterday to file formal complaints, and my understanding is that there's going to be civil rights complaints. They're take it to the limit,
They're going
baby.
for it.
They're going for it. I don't blame them. It's their right. But what is it about police stations? And I had the opportunity with a good friend, Christine Bento, about a month or two ago, in the Bucket. Went to a police station. A police officer had seized a woman's cell phone as part of a criminal investigation. And, she called on her friend's phones. This is the only phone she has. Literally, it's the backbone of her. Couldn't figure out if work was calling her or not. She was not a party to the criminal issue. She happened to be on scene. So finally, they tell her she can come by and pick up her phone. Why do police departments insist, and it's part of the psychology, it's happened to me too many times, to think that it's accidental, that when civilians get to the station to either pick up their property or to pick up their son or to drop off paperwork, they're made to wait. They're always made to wait. A half hour, an hour. I sat in that Pawtucket police station over hour and a half. Again, a woman of age, nice person, needed to go to work, just wanted her phone back. And we go to the police.
Opinion?
Yeah, please go. You're the expert here.
You want my opinion? It's because they can. And it's because there's a control. It's about asserting control.
Right.
And it's something, it's a mentality. It's a mentality that unfortunately exists in many different areas of law enforcement. And it's one that I'm disappointed that I have not seen addressed by, the people that ultimately can address it. Someone like the Attorney General, to take these issues seriously enough to make certain police departments or certain individual officers who are using that tactic accountable. Now, certainly the Attorney General has made no bones about going after certain police officers when it fits his political narrative. But when it doesn't fit the political narrative, we see situations like this. And it's unfortunate because I know what a difficult job a lot of these police have. I know what a difficult job that most of the rank and file that they have, the split second decisions, the worry, are they coming home that night? Luckily we are not in a situation here in Rhode Island like they are in places like Chicago, New York City, where you have police officers being gunned down at an alarming rate. But they are still facing violence nonetheless, and I'm certainly not going to sit here and second guess their split second decisions in situations like that. But I am going to sit here and second guess why they do things like you just mentioned, why they make you wait, why they take your cell phone, why they can't return your cell phone. Because as a prosecutor, I can tell you anything that's useful on that cell phone can be dumped within a matter of minutes. And when I say dumped, I mean electronically downloaded to a storage device where it is going to be completely secure in the police hands. So where the physical phone makes absolutely no difference at that point in the investigation. So yes, ma'am, here's your phone back. We have all the information we need. We have a mirror image of your cell phone data that's on there, and we'll investigate that. You can have your phone back now. There's really no reason for that. And I can say that as a former prosecutor because one of the most common questions I used to get, Pat, from the police was, can I give this guy his phone back? And I'd say, did you dump it? And they say, yes. Yeah, give the phone back. There's really no reason to hold it at that point. I don't have a good answer for that. I have my suspicions. I have my experience that I can base it on, but based on this video, based on some of the incidents that we've seen, going on right now, unfortunately, the police seem to be taking a more authoritarian attitude towards those who are not in favor with the current administration or who have different views than the current administration. And I would hope for the two individuals who were arrested in Cumberland this past weekend, I would hope now that the cases have been brought to the Attorney General for prosecution, I would hope that Peter Nerona, being the progressive civil rights protector that he claims to be, would review this evidence and say there is no evidence to prosecute these cases for any of these charges because of the concerns for the infringement on constitutional rights and civil liberties of the individuals involved here. I would certainly hope that would be a concern of his because he certainly goes on TV enough and spouts all his, I guess I call it street cred for being a fighter for all the civil liberties. Yet I don't see him doing it. So he has an opportunity here to show off that he really is a fighter for the people. He really is looking out for the best interests of Rhode Islanders and the constitutional rights. Let's see what he does after reviewing this, because it's his office who will be prosecuting it. The state police made the arrest. The Attorney General prosecutes the case. So let's see where he comes down. Based on his history, I don't have high hopes for him making the right decision.
I hear you. One final question. If you spoke about it in a piece you did, that's at coalitionradionetwork.com, our website, which we're very much a video-driven organization, but we put up important stuff. If you have a moment, kind of wind your way through that. Whenever there's an event like this, you're kind enough to take some time out and put to writing your thoughts. But I have to ask you, just if you can explain to folks who might be hearing about this the first time, the notion that these two young men spent the night in jail. Talk to us about the charge. Why did they spend the night in jail? In fact, a night into a morning into an early afternoon, if I understand it correctly, and the whole bail process.
Yeah, and this is what has angered me the most, Pat, and that's why I put the statement out, not just because of the potential constitutional violations I saw, but because of what I did find out as far as them being admitted to bail. Now, the police by law have 24 hours to hold you if they're going to charge you before they have to admit you to bail. That doesn't mean they have to do it that way. And
Right.
particularly right now, particularly right now in the light of COVID, where we were talking about everything comes down to COVID, the district court, which handles misdemeanor cases, has issued a protocol for cases which are considered priority and cases are considered non-priority. These individuals were both charged with what I have discovered to be, or at least according to the state police, have been disorderly conduct, which is a petty misdemeanor, which is the lowest form of criminal violation that you can possibly have here in the state of Rhode Island, resisting arrest, which is also a misdemeanor, and obstruction of a police officer in the execution of his duty, which is also a misdemeanor. I did a quick search, the Rhode Island Judiciary Database, to determine whether or not these individuals have any prior criminal record. It did not appear that they do. They both appear to live in Rhode Island, which for bail purposes is a very important situation because it determines whether or not you're likely to show up in court, because the purpose of bail is to ensure your appearance in court. The district court protocol right now classifies these offenses and people with this background as non-priority, which means that in most, if not all circumstances, they should be given a summons and released and a date to appear for a formal arraignment in court at a future date, and not brought or held overnight or immediately brought to court, because they're not crimes of violence, they're not alcohol-related offenses, they're not domestic offenses, and they're not felonies. So the fact that the police would hold these individuals in their cell block overnight, and this was taking place around what, 7, 8 o'clock at night? Am I right, Pat?
Right.
This is taking place at 7, 8 o'clock at night. The witnesses here are basically, or the so-called complainants here are the police. It's my understanding that no individual other than a police was involved in or was assaulted or anything along those lines. So there's no need to collect further evidence at that point. You have the individuals in your custody with no prior record. They should have been given a summons to appear at an arraignment in the district court, or at the very least, you have bail commissioners who are authorized by the chief judge of the district court to act as judges who are available 24/7 all the time to go out to the police station and essentially set bail. And in this case, that did happen, but it didn't happen until the next afternoon, from my understanding. And yes, they were released on personal recognizance that next afternoon, probably just prior to that 24-hour period. So why a bail commissioner wasn't called or why a summons wasn't given to these individuals, to me, violates the protocol of the district court that's currently in place. It violates the bail guidelines, and it was just done as a message. And I put that in my statement. It was done as a message. If you want to mess with us, us being the administration, us being the state police, us being individuals who have a different point of view than you healthcare workers, we're going to show you what kind of power we really have. And we're going to make you sit in the cell block overnight when felons are given. I have cases right now, Pat. I do criminal defense. I have felons. People who are being charged with egregious felony charges who are being released on summonses or personal recognizance within hours of their arrest. And these individuals were forced to sit in a cell block overnight, not even being given the opportunity to be admitted to bail until the next afternoon. To me, that is it's a blatant abuse of authority and a violation of the current district court criminal protocols.
You know, all of this has been a build-up to the one question I've been wanting to ask all night. The officer from the Pawtucket Police Department is on video having hit a young man in a truck after a road rage style chase where alcohol might be involved. Again, you have a right to presumed innocence. He has the right to have had a vigorous defense on his behalf. But looking at the bail protocol, the arrest protocol, if you could, to sort of close out the evening, you could compare and contrast the treatment of the officer from Pawtucket and the two young men who were involved in a very brief, in my humble opinion, police-induced altercation.
I mean, it's night and day. You have an officer. Again, he is presumed innocent, and he is going to get that vigorous defense, I'm sure. But you have an officer who's on video firing his weapon and striking a young individual, a young man, with a firearm. If he's convicted of those charges, he's facing 4. If he's convicted of those charges, he is going to prison. There is no question about that. If he's convicted, where you have individuals here who are charged with petty misdemeanors and misdemeanors, which I would agree, based on that video, and maybe we'll find out more in the future, but based on that video, would seem to be police-induced arrest, which were forced to sit in a cell block overnight into the next afternoon before being admitted to bail. It's my understanding that the officer from Pawtucket did not sit in a jail cell for 1 minute. He was allowed to turn himself in. He was admitted to personal recognizance, which I don't have a problem with personal recognizance. They obviously know where they can find him. I don't think there's any reason he's not going to show up to court. So I don't have a problem with that. But if you ever have a situation where you have police that need to make an immediate arrest and put somebody in a holding situation, it's somebody who's just fired a weapon and struck somebody, perhaps without any justification whatsoever. That may be the one that you might want to have sit and cool his heels in a jail cell while they process the charges, and then have him admitted to bail at that point, as opposed to 2 individuals without records, Rhode Island residents, military service, and being charged with petty misdemeanor and misdemeanors who have to face that. To me, I don't understand the disparate treatment, other than that's politics, Pat, and that's why I'm running to be the Attorney General, because there was a situation for the Attorney General to make the right decision, and in both cases, I think failed.
And by the way, just as an aside, that officer, my understanding, was not allowed to leave the state, and essentially go on some form of vacation before he came back to what may be a longer-term vacation in a state facility near you. But it's a perfect segue. And Chaz, I have to tell you, this is the reason, nights like this, why we have this program. Because the ability to cut through the chaos and the nonsense and the urban legends and the myths and what we think should be and how the day should have been are very different from the reality. And your continued ability to point out simple truths, the institutional experience and knowledge, the understanding of our criminal justice system in not just what's written in the law, not what's spoken about over conversation over a beer or a cup of coffee, but what the actual policies and procedures, the nuts and bolts, how this runs, and, well, in the case of this past weekend, how it doesn't run, or how it runs over folks who are part of our Rhode Island family. In one case, a young man who is, I'm told you, never a former Marine, so is in fact a retired Marine who spent 4 years in this nation's service. So,
it's tough to swallow. I've had a very difficult time swallowing what we saw on that video.
Well, again, in the halls of justice, justice is in fact often found in the halls. Chaz, why don't you take us home? If you don't mind, I'm just going to give a quick plug for the station. We're going to be doing a little bit of a fundraiser over the next couple of weeks. We've got some fun T-shirts we've come up with, so just different ways where regular folks, many of whom are suffering, can do a couple of simple things to help support the Coalition Radio Network and its efforts. The whole team, you, me, Keyshawn, the whole team has been everywhere over the last couple of weeks, literally everywhere, working around the clock because of the absence of outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. I believe at this point in time, our crew can point proudly to what we offer to the community literally every day. So, folks, if you're listening to Chaz for the first time, Wednesdays at 8:15-ish, depending on the day, depending on how organized I am sometimes. He's on. These shows are kept on our social media. There's shows like this that address topical issues in law enforcement and the news cycle. And then there's shows which are timeless in the sense that, they're based around certain aspects of the legal system. I, of course, always point out to one of my favorites when we spent an hour talking about small claims court. But you know what? Folks, if you ever have to go to small claims court, or you're thinking about it, or you just are interested, watch that hour of programming, because you'll learn, you'll save yourself a lot of money and a lot of pain and gain an understanding of how that particular aspect of the court system works on your behalf. So we ask you, the simplest thing in the world, if you can like us at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, you can follow us on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. We got our link tree up with a list of our stuff. If you could really subscribe to us on YouTube, that's it. We've got an Instagram page that's starting to grow. That's it. Costs you nothing. We got some fun T-shirts up. If you got a couple of dollars laying around and you want to laugh, if you could buy one of our T-shirts. And we'll point out a couple of other ways, painless ways, that folks can help us support our mission. So, Chaz, why don't you take us home and set us up for next week? Or what is often happening is I meet Chaz at some undetermined location in the bunker to have an emergency video shot. That could happen. The way things are going, I might see you in a couple hours. But take us home, buddy.
You're making me sound like Dick Cheney at some undisclosed location now. So, but Pat, I do want to say, before I take us home, I do want to say thank you for being that independent media who's there covering these issues that a lot of people care about. And to me, it's just it's baffling to see an complete absence of interest from our so-called legacy media on a lot of these issues. So I think the people of Rhode Island owe you and the Coalition Radio Network a debt of gratitude for covering these issues and being there at times when nobody else seems to care. So I'm Chaz Calenda. This is another episode of Chaz Calenda, attorney at law. I'm a lawyer at the law firm of Inman and Torgy, which is at 1500 Nooseneck Hill Road in Coventry, Rhode Island, 401-823-9200. Importantly, I'm also a candidate to be the next Rhode Island Attorney General in 2022, where I will put the law above politics. And you can find me at my website, which is CHAS, CHAS4AG.com. You can also find me on Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter. It's Chaz Calenda for Rhode Island Attorney General, and at Charles Calenda at Twitter. You can find me on those places and find a little bit more about where I'm coming from and why I'm running to be the next Attorney General. So I thank Pat, I thank you again for being my guest here tonight. And I look forward to having another conversation with you in the near future. And I look forward to seeing everybody else here on Chaz Calenda, attorney at law, and on the Coalition Radio Network on our next episode. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And God bless and have a good night.